So today we're going to talk about the next Bitcoin, and my belief that the next Bitcoin is Bitcoin. But firstly, who am I and why should you listen to me? So I've been in Bitcoin since 2013. I have worked and continue to work with a variety of different blockchain businesses. I speak around the world, and I contribute to a lot of publications in the space. And I'm going to quickly, shamelessly plug two of my companies, and then we'll get started. So firstly, BlockSmarter. This is an agency that I started. We don't offer specific services. What we do is we create win-wins, kind of like digital rainmaking. We put people together that can work well together. Sometimes we sit on the board of different companies. It's always about finding a way that people can work together to do something more in the space. And then the project that I started last year, which is what I spend most of my time on, is a project called CoinJanitor. And the idea here is that there are a lot of cryptocurrencies that have failed, and no one is doing anything about it. So my premise is that we actually need to clean this up. There needs to exist in any mature market a mechanism for recycling value from failed companies, from failed projects. So we do this by paying users for tokens from 5 years ago that are worth nothing. We take out any assets that can be reused, and we basically destroy the project and burn the tokens. So the next Bitcoin. Today, I'm going to zoom out and take a 50,000-foot view of Bitcoin. What is Bitcoin and where is it in the market? And we're also going to look historically through some of its development and look a little bit forward through the implications of the assumptions in my hypothesis. But before I do, I'd like to get a little bit of an understanding of the level of knowledge in the audience. So who has been involved in Bitcoin for more than 2 years? And who believes Ethereum is the future? And who understands the difference between a hard fork and a soft fork? Who is a developer or has developer-level knowledge of the protocol? Okay, great. So before we can examine what the next Bitcoin might be, we need to understand what Bitcoin is. So is it a payment method? Is it a technology? Is it something else? And I would argue that it's all of the above. It's everything that we understand it to be, and it's probably a lot more than we realize it is today. A few years ago, I made a quote, and it spread a lot, and it's been included in a lot of publications. And the quote was that blockchain is the tech, and that Bitcoin is merely the first mainstream manifestation of its potential. I realized after I said it that I was wrong. And the quote, despite being displayed all over the place, should actually read, Bitcoin is the tech, and blockchain is merely the first manifestation of its mainstream potential. Now, some of what I'm going to say today may seem indignant. It may be exclusionary with the professed certainty of the hypothesis in Bitcoin's future dominance. But I want to be clear. I'm not suggesting that there is no space for any technology or coin except Bitcoin. What I am suggesting is that Bitcoin is so far superior that second place won't even be the same sport. And I'd ask you to do two things during my talk. The first is not just listen to what I'm saying, but imagine that I'm right. Think about the implications for the future. Let's go on this journey today and imagine that Bitcoin is that dominant. And the second thing is I will try to run through as quickly as possible and leave time for questions. I would really like you to challenge me on this. I'm saying a lot of things that are controversial or very assertive in my certainty of Bitcoin's future. And please, ask difficult questions. Tell me why I'm wrong. One of the strengths of this community is our ability to debate. And through debate, to form consensus and ultimately increase our own understanding of the space. So a lot of people use different terms. The idea of blockchain or Bitcoin or crypto, and I'm going to argue that they're all in effect exactly the same thing. It's merely our misunderstanding of the space that hasn't yet allowed us to see that there isn't any real difference between any of these things. And in the future, when we look back a couple years from now, we'll understand that all of these are simply just aspects of Bitcoin. We see a lot of messages talking about the next Bitcoin. You see it in marketing messages, in a lot of mainstream media. There's the talk of I'm not going to mention there's one now that's been going around the last 2 weeks professing to be the next Bitcoin. So why look for another Bitcoin at all? So if we forget price and we're looking for something for the future, then the only possible reasons for another Bitcoin would either be better technology, a unique use case that Bitcoin isn't capable of, or centralization. And I argue that any search for a better Bitcoin is either a waste of time, misguided in its efforts, or dishonest to the public. Bitcoin is by far the most superior protocol that we have, and my argument is it will continue to be and become more and more superior as time goes on. And we would be better off just spending the time working on Bitcoin. And as we move forward, all of these other technologies that are created or use case identified are ultimately going to fold back into Bitcoin in one way or another. So in order to kind of look at what I'm suggesting, we're going to look at some historical examples of other things. And I've called these mini gold rushes. Throughout the history of Bitcoin and crypto, we've seen the emergence of something new. And each time, they've been displayed as the next big thing, or this is different to Bitcoin, or this is going to change the space completely. And I argue that that's not really the case. It's rather a function of sensationalism in journalism, or new entrants into the crypto market that are trying to be opportunistic for their own gain in portraying it that way. And ultimately, all of these things are actually just blips on the radar of what Bitcoin is. And 5 that we know and can examine from the past are coin creation in the early days, Bitcoin clones, proof of work clones, the mining, when people are able to do home mining, ICOs, and that kind of brings us to this year. And where we are now and looking forward is exchanges and exchange listings and the advent of stablecoins. So let's look at the characteristics of a mini gold rush, or how we're identifying them. And we see that as different as these technologies are, or these events were in cryptocurrency, they all have the same characteristics. We have a wave of new users coming into the market. Those users generally don't have a good understanding of the history of crypto or Bitcoin, but they believe that this is how crypto looks, like we saw in the case of ICOs or anything else. Then we have a lot of talk about how this is the next big thing, how it's going to replace Bitcoin, how it's going to change everything. We see the entrance of a lot of opportunistic actors, new companies are created, new types of services, and then we see a lot of hype. A lot of hype, market prices, things go crazy, and ultimately there's disillusionment as it doesn't pan out the way that all these new actors promised that it would. Then we see vilification again of Bitcoin in mainstream media, and ultimately most of the resources that were spent during this mini gold rush are then folded back in and benefit Bitcoin. And that is basically how every single one of these can be viewed. The one that needs to be looked at a little bit differently is trading. Trading Bitcoin as a currency, as a digital pair, is a little bit different. It's cyclical in nature. It will keep happening. But my argument is that every time there's one of these mini gold rushes, we see an aspect of that in trading, and it exhibits very similar behavior because we have the mainstream attention, because we have this entrance of new people who view it as a get-rich-quick scheme or some new opportunistic technology that allows for arbitrage, right? So the first one is the creation of coins. If you go back to 2011, 2012, when it was very easy to create your own coin, you could create some sort of clone or set up some sort of POW coin for your country, for your community, for your church. The promise was that I can create this currency and become rich, the same like Bitcoin appreciate in price, so too will mine. What we understand now is that that's not true. It's not enough simply to create a coin. The coin has to have network effect. It has to have critical mass in order for it to be economically successful. Mining. In the beginning, anyone could mine on a CPU. And then that moved to GPUs before let's skip arrays and end up with ASICs. Those days you could mine on your computer and you could essentially print your own money. I can get rich by running my computer and letting it mine this crazy new thing called Bitcoin. That is not true. In reality, once Bitcoin became economically interesting and the financial incentives are large enough, then we see institutional level investment in terms of mining infrastructure and hardware, and that creates a barrier to entry that the home user can no longer cross. ICOs, which is a topic of a lot of conferences lately, and obviously something that's very fresh in our mind. So the promise was I could come up with a great idea, I could go to the crowd, tell them my idea, and they would give millions of dollars to build that idea. That's not true. In order to get investment from a public forum, from a VC, or any sort of traditional enterprise, you have to have a working product and a go-to-market strategy that makes sense, focused on users, or you have to have an exceptional use case that allows you to exist in the market. And before I move forward for a second, I just want to say, I'm not saying whether these things are good or bad in and of themselves. To be clear, my position is that most of the people who were exposed to them misunderstood that they were just an aspect of Bitcoin, and every bad event or new technology that's created in cryptocurrency only serves to increase Bitcoin's dominance and superiority. So now we have exchanges, and primarily focused on listings. This is where we are right now, and we haven't seen this one play out yet. But the promise is that anyone can create an exchange, or a host of exchange listing companies can be created, and they can charge ridiculous amounts of money to get ICOs to list on exchanges, because liquidity is the key determinant of success in crypto. That's trash. It's not true. And the way this is going to end is these guys will go out of business, because unless you're actually providing significant value by being on an exchange or by helping with a listing on an exchange, all you're doing is essentially trying to rape a segment of the market. And stablecoins. And yesterday there was a great keynote about stablecoins, and what I'm about to say is arguably controversial, but the idea is that crypto is too volatile. We need stablecoins so that we can have access to general services, so that industry and commerce can take part in cryptocurrency, so there can be security for traders. And there's a lot of space to create a lot of stablecoins. My suggestion, and we'll see in a couple of years and can see, is that there isn't enough space for more than 1 or 2 genuine stablecoins, and the market will understand that crypto doesn't actually care about stablecoins. So as interesting as they are as a concept, and as seemingly necessary as they are as a mechanism, my premise is that in time we'll understand that crypto just doesn't care. So if you look at the timeline and you look at these events over the history of Bitcoin, and you imagine that coin creation is like 2011, let's say stablecoins is more 2019 onwards, this is actually a timeline of developments in Bitcoin. Each of these things was just an aspect that made Bitcoin better in some way. Again, not bad of themselves, but the portrayal and our understanding of them was very, very, very flawed. And ultimately, Bitcoin is here to stay. And when we say it to the outside world, it's generally to people who don't understand crypto and think that cryptocurrency is going to go away. This is an audience that understands crypto, and I'm saying it even more emphatically. Within the world of crypto, Bitcoin is dominant. It is superior. And as the years pass, its dominance and its superiority will only increase. And when we look back a few years from now, we will understand how Bitcoin was always the answer. And all of these technologies and use cases and things that we find along the way, if they have real value or real world acceptance, will ultimately just become part of Bitcoin in some way or form. And Bitcoin is the answer. So thank you. And if you want to get in touch with me, there are my details, and I would welcome some questions.
Any questions for Marc? Any questions for Marc and his initiative?
I try to run very quickly. There's
we
actually
have
a lot.
5 minutes, so feel free.
No one wants to argue?
Yeah, the purpose is not to argue. I actually believe that that Bitcoin is much more superior than the others. But during your presentation, you didn't you didn't discuss any of the shortcomings and the possible solutions to those shortcomings of Bitcoin, because we need to be realistic. I mean, we're not there yet.
Sure.
And there are shortcomings with Bitcoin, you know, scalability. I mean, and I didn't hear any of those, so maybe you can elaborate on some. And I have another comment regarding security tokens. I'm not sure when you're saying that Bitcoin is superior, are you also including non-currencies? I mean, security tokens are expected to be similar to equity in a company. And that has advantages. I mean, it's not competing with Bitcoins, but so these are the two things I would like to hear from you.
Okay.
Thanks.
So in terms of Bitcoin shortcomings, there are a lot. And I'm not going to focus on specifically what they are. And electricity usage is not the big problem. It's been made out the last few months. But Bitcoin has a very elegant way of solving problems. When a problem gets serious enough, the development community mobilizes, and through peer review and social or technical consensus, we implement a solution that's better. Every time we've had a problem, it's been done. Like even in the old days, Satoshi did this originally. You see the whole like hard fork and inverted hard fork and everything last year. We had a problem, we argued, we acted like little whiny babies for a long time, and then when the time came, we fixed the problem. So I don't know what the answer to all the shortcomings are, and I'm not going to sit here and list them, but I believe in our ability as a community and the technical system for development in open source software to allow the implementation of whatever solution makes sense at the time that we need it.
Can you list one? What's the biggest shortcoming?
Scalability and electricity are the two obvious ones, right?
And how are you fixing it? Is the community accepting a certain alternative or another?
Lightning. The choice of a layer 2 solution as opposed to scaling on-chain with bigger blocks. Personally, I'm against bigger blocks as the only solution. Lightning solves it. All the arguments against scalability are either our transaction volume, which is trash because we don't need it yet, or the fact that we had congested mempools, high fees. Mempool is empty. Bitcoin is cheap to send. There's no problem. It will become a problem again because Bitcoin will be more successful, more adopted, and more used. Then we'll solve it another way, but that will be based on a layer 2 solution, which Lightning was the beginning of, or the first test case of it. In terms of security tokens, very quickly, like everything else, my argument is very, very emphatic. Security tokens, any other cryptocurrency development you can think of, will in the future be Bitcoin. There is nothing else in the space except Bitcoin. In the end of the day, 10 years from now, everything else will be so far behind Bitcoin. And there's an obvious question to that. I mean,
I didn't get that. What do you mean it will become Bitcoin? It's an equity in a company which gives you access to its profits.
And in 5 minutes, I can't explain why this particular case. So I'm trying to kind of zoom out and give a much more crazy opinion, which is that anything you can think of, including equities and security tokens and whatever else, in the future will be Bitcoin.
Okay.
The last question, 1 minute left for Marc.
Hello.
Hi.
I would like a comment regarding the bitmain factor, because it holds more than 40% of the hash. And as you see recently, last night, we turned the hash rate to support Bitcoin fork, ABC, and total hash fell 30% from 60 million terahashes, fell to 42. I just checked the numbers.
Okay.
So I believe it's a big centralized factor in the decentralized Bitcoin. And if it decides for crazy personal reasons to stop mining, what will happen?
Okay. So really 2 parts to the question. One is how centralized mining is. I agree. It has become very, very centralized. The second is, what do we do about that, right? Not a lot. It would be better in many ways if it wasn't centralized. And you see the arguments here of Raspberry Pi versus a $20,000 machine. Do nodes actually matter or not? Casa, with Jameson now, with their new company in terms of the Lightning nodes, you know? It is better if it's not centralized. The reality is it takes an immense amount of money to be able to mine today profitably. I believe that in any healthy market, the same as we'll see in Bitcoin, as economic incentives increase and we see the entrance of more actors and you see less, of this bad acting, then equilibrium will be reached that is more decentralized. It will never be as decentralized as, let's say, nodes or users, because it can't be, but it will be much better than it is now. And without naming anyone in particular, I think there are a lot of known bad actors today in Bitcoin that are trying to co-opt the network for their own purpose in the future. When the network is bigger and worth more, there will be less of these. And every time they attempt one of these stupid attacks, all they're doing is essentially weakening their own hands and taking themselves out of the market more and more and more.
I'm not saying that it is a backdoor, Bitmain.
No,
but,
I never said that either. Just,
it will always be a big factor controlling the Bitcoin. So
I don't. If your point is
at least the hash, not the nodes.
Is your point that Bitmain will always be a big?
Of course.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's true.
And how big institutional money are going to trust their billions to someone that it is at any time can turn off the machines and crash the price?
We are so early in this market, and this
I agree, but
it's
Bitmain,
like saying MySpace
Bitmain is going to disappear. It's not. It's going to always be there.
Well, that's not true. When MySpace disappeared and led to Facebook, when MySpace before Facebook, you can't say this early on that Bitmain will always be there. You can't. I mean, I'll argue it. They are there now. Right now, they represent a material percentage of hash power. That is true, and there's risks associated with that. But to say that they will exist as a company, it can only be if they operate well, if they're profitable, if they continue to be efficient.
I believe you understand what I mean. Anyway, thank you very much.
Okay.
Let's hear a last question from Roger.
Sorry. I heard you talking about the Lightning Network. I have and how it solves all these problems. I have my iPhone here. Can you help me set up a Lightning wallet and send me some coins today? And why or why not?
Touche. So I just want to be clear, and you and I don't agree on all of this. Lightning Network in its current form has a lot of problems. We both know this, and you're right. I think that it is the first implementation of a layer 2 solution. I personally believe layer 2 is the answer, you don't. But like with any new technology, Lightning's mistakes and the problems we have to fix over the next couple of years are going to lead us to the right solution, which I believe is based on layer 2. But yeah, a lot of it today is pretty shitty to use from a user perspective.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.